She's not from Alaska, she's never lived in Alaska, and she's visiting us all the way from Boston. She's now retired, but in her professional life, she wrote a number of cookbooks, and it sparked an unlikely pen pal relationship in a pre-email time. Please help me welcome to the stage, all the way from Boston, Laura Brody.
Answering a call for a magazine article about true stories from Alaska. I had a true story from Alaska. I typed it up and I sent it off. And about a month later, a very enthusiastic guy calls me. He says, "Hi, I'm Chris. I'm calling from Dark Alaska Nights," or whatever. I said, "Okay." He said, "We loved your story. It made us cry. Will you come and tell it?" And I said, "What do you mean tell it? I thought this was a magazine." He said, No, we're a radio show." And I said, "Really? Where are you?" And he said, "Fairbanks, Alaska." And I said, "When is this?" And he said, "November." I said, "Not a chance." Chris called me every year for 5 years. And he said, "Will you come? Will you come? Will you come?" And finally, we came. I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I did, and I'm so glad I came now. We haven't had snow in Boston in years. So when I received this envelope in my mailbox, I knew even before I opened it, there was something unusual. First of all, it was addressed to me and my city. There was no street address. Secondly, I noticed that it had been postmarked in January. It was now April. And third, the return address was Kodiak, Alaska. So I opened it up, and inside, a sheet of paper, blue lined, that had been ripped out of a spiral bound notebook, so it had sort of this fuzzy edge, and it said in block print that looked not unlike a ransom note, "Dear Laura Brody, I am a desperate man. Will you marry me? If you can't marry me, will you come to Alaska, and will you bring brownies, and will you do this right away?" I immediately got out the atlas to see where Kodiak, Alaska was, to make sure I couldn't be stalked. When I saw it was an island 3,000 miles from Boston, I sort of relaxed. The next line said, "A man like me holed up in my remote cabin, all alone with only a wolf mix and a Rottweiler for company, dreams up a list of unattainable goods, and your brownies are now at the top of my list." I got out the atlas one more time. But then as I read the letter, I felt a little better. It said, a friend had come and brought a box of books to help me get through the long, cold, dark winter nights. And I read all of the books, and at the very bottom was your book. I never would read a cookbook. I don't cook, but I was desperate and there was nothing else to read. So I read your book, and I got to the recipe on page 40, and you described those brownies. I need those brownies. And I need them now. Signed, your best admirer, Wade Watkins. There's nothing like guilt and flattery to motivate someone. So I said to my family, "I'm taking over the kitchen for the next few days. You're on your own, get takeout, see you later." I went in, I made 4 dozen of the brownies from page 40. I made 6 dozen chocolate chip cookies. I made 3 pounds of fudge. I made some truffles. I packed them into a cardboard box, and on top I put the 5-pound bar of Swiss milk chocolate I'd been saving for a special occasion. And at my husband's suggestion, I put in a bottle of Alka-Seltzer. Because I didn't want this box to take 4 months to get to Kodiak, I FedExed it. Do you have any idea how much it cost to overnight a 20-pound box of anything to Kodiak, Alaska? More than I think Seward paid for this place. But it went off and I patted myself on the shoulder, done the right thing. 2 weeks later, I get a call, and at first all I heard was static. And I heard a voice yelling, Laura, can you hear me? It's Wade. And I said, I can hear you, Wade. And this was on a ship-to-shore radio, so I figured out right away, only one person can talk at a time. So you got this sort of static going, and he's calling and I'm calling, and then the static sort of cleared, and he said that he had gotten a mother lode of all mother loads, and he had shared it with all of his friends and neighbors all over Kodiak, and they were all on a chocolate high, and he couldn't thank me enough. It was just the most wonderful thing that ever happened. And I said to him, you know, my life, I think, is very different from yours, and I'm sort of curious about what Kodiak is like, because I'm really never, ever going to be in Alaska, I thought. And I said, I'll tell you what, write to me and tell me about yourself, and I'll send, not 20 pounds, but I'll send some more brownies. So his second letter came, and it was a family affair. We read the letter, and it turns out Wade said he had grown up in upstate New York, and that within a short period of time, his wife left him, his dog died, his car died, and he had a fist fight with his best friend. Now, I have a 6-year-old here, and suddenly my stock has gone up because I have a friend who has fist fights. Wade told me a bit about himself. He was a part-time journalist, a part-time hunter, a part-time trapper. He taught survival training to people who might fall off the side of a boat, probably something you're really not supposed to do in Alaska. And he told me about Kodiak and what it was like and how beautiful, and it was mountainous and had beautiful fish and birds, and he described the whole thing. He said, you know, you'd really love it here. And I said, right, I'm sure I would love it here. So I wrote back to him, and that started a 10-year correspondence. We got to know each other very well. We shared some great things that happened to each of us. He would write about how beautiful this place was, but then he would also write about flying into Kodiak. And he said that the airport ends at a mountain. And he said mountains tend to stop things like airplanes. He also described the weather, which is always marginal. Apparently there's a sign that says Kodiak at the airport, weather, marginal. And he said, well, you would really love it. And I would, you know, I'd get out the atlas, and Kodiak hadn't moved any closer to Boston. I still haven't been to Vienna or Venice. But our son Sam was totally taken with Wade and his stories. And every time Wade would share a story about how different our lives were, for instance, when Wade wanted to see bears, he went to the dump. When I wanted to see bears, I turned on the Discovery Channel. Wade wrote a whole letter in drawings about how he stalked a moose and killed the moose and dressed the moose, and this is all involved with his hunting knife. Sam was very taken with the hunting knife. Sam would walk around with a butter knife trying to whittle. I, in turn, sent him the menu that I created when we fed Julia Child at our house. We shared hard times, too, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, he was the first person outside our small circle of family and friends that I really shared it with. I sort of felt comfortable. I mean, I knew him, 10 years is a long time to be corresponding with someone. I had no idea what he looked like. And his hardest time was when the Exxon Valdez dumped 10 million gallons of crude oil in Prince William Sound, and it migrated over to Kodiak, and he wrote about what it was like pulling dead birds out of the water covered with oil and trying to clean the ones that were still living. Wade had terrible, terrible choice of girlfriends. He had these very, ongoing liaisons with these women who were totally inappropriate, but I got to hear all about them. Very detailed. I got to hear about his sobriety and his not sobriety. I got to write about what it was like having teenage boys. But Wade would call me twice a year, on my birthday and at Christmas. And it was a family affair. We'd put him on the speakerphone and we'd all talk to him. Every time at the end, he would say, "Laura, when are you coming?" And I would say, "I'm coming. Someday I'm coming." And then one day in July, we were packing to go on a family vacation, and the phone rang and it was Wade, and he said that he'd had a backache for a while and he had put off going to the doctor. And when he finally got to the doctor, the diagnosis was colon cancer that was so advanced that surgery wasn't going to do anything. And there was sort of a pause, and he said, "I can't believe I'm going to die and never meet you." And I said, "I'm coming." Do you have any idea what a last-minute ticket to Alaska, Kodiak, Alaska? So with my husband's blessing, and I packed a backpack, which I only had a weekend before we were going away. I went into the kitchen that night. I made lots of brownies. I put them in a Tupperware container. I had my backpack and my Tupperware container of brownies, and I flew. I didn't mention that I don't love flying, but I flew from Boston to Chicago, Chicago to Seattle, Seattle to Anchorage, and at Anchorage, I saw the guy with the sign that said, "Kodiak, weather marginal." I clutched my brownies and got on that plane. And then I'm thinking, how am I going to know him? I don't even know what he looks like. So we landed, and I looked out the window, and on the tarmac, there was a group of people, and they were all holding up a copy of my book. And in the center was a tall, bearded man in overalls with an armful of red roses. And I came out and I handed him the box of brownies, and I said, "Brownies, special delivery." And we hugged for a long time. And because the sun doesn't set in July in Alaska, we had 48 hours to spend together. And he took me to see his cabin. I met his dogs. I met his friends. And everywhere we went, he would give brownies to this person and to that person. And we basically talked. And at the end of the weekend, we're sitting in the airport, and there wasn't much to say. And he said goodbye, and he handed me a package wrapped in brown paper, tied with string, and he said, "Don't open it until you're airborne." So the plane took off, and I opened the package, and in it was a hunting knife for Sam, and the last brownie.